You came here because you saw the title, Delete Instagram? No. Change your mind? Yes. Stoic wisdom. And let's be honest with each other right from the start. You probably weren't going to delete it anyway. You don't want to quit social media. You just want to stop feeling like garbage every time you open it. You want to scroll without that dull ache in your chest, without that nagging voice whispering that you're falling behind, that you're not enough, that your life is somehow smaller or dimmer or less impressive than the lives flickering across your screen. You want to be able to see your friend's promotion, your colleague's engagement, your former classmate's new house, that influencer's perfect vacation, and feel genuine happiness for them, rather than that familiar, sinking sensation of inadequacy that makes you question your own choices, your own progress, and your own worth as a human being. And the good news, the really liberating news, is that a Roman emperor figured out how to solve this problem nearly 2,000 years ago, long before the first pixel was ever lit, long before the first like button was ever coded, long before anyone ever felt the sting of watching a former classmate buy a house while you're still trying to figure out dinner. Marcus Aurelius, who sat on the throne of the most powerful empire the world had ever seen, who could have had anything and everything his heart desired, who could have spent his days basking in the adoration of millions, instead spent his mornings writing in a private journal that was never meant to be published, reminding himself over and over again that the only opinion that ultimately matters is his own, that the only approval worth seeking is the approval of his own conscience, that the only mirror worth looking into is the mirror of his own character. He understood something that we have collectively forgotten in our age of endless scrolling and constant connectivity, that external validation is a bottomless pit that can never be filled, that the applause of the crowd is intoxicating but ultimately hollow, and that true peace comes not from being admired by others, but from being at peace with yourself. And that is exactly what we are going to unpack today. Not a guilt trip about screen time, not a naive call to smash your phone against the wall and move to a cabin in the woods, but a practical, battle-tested, psychologically robust framework for changing your mind so profoundly that the digital noise around you simply loses its power to wound you. The problem we are facing is not actually social media itself. The problem is the ancient primal wiring inside your skull that hasn't updated its software since you were a tribal hunter-gatherer, desperately trying to figure out whether your fellow tribe members accepted you or whether you were about to be cast out to die alone in the wilderness. Your brain is still operating on that old operating system, constantly scanning for social threats, constantly checking your status within the hierarchy, constantly asking, am I safe? Am I valued? Am I respected? And social media, with its endless feeds and quantifiable metrics and meticulously curated highlight reels, is the perfect predator designed to exploit that ancient vulnerability. It is a dopamine slot machine that pays out just often enough to keep you pulling the lever, but never often enough to make you feel truly satisfied, truly whole, truly enough. The engineers who built these platforms understood exactly what they were doing. They understood that the human brain is wired to crave social approval, and they built their products to exploit that craving as efficiently and profitably as possible. Because every moment you spend seeking validation on their platform is a moment they can monetize. Every like you chase is a data point they can sell. Every insecurity they can trigger is a reason for you to keep coming back for more. The Stoics understood this game thousands of years before Mark Zuckerberg was even a glimmer in his father's eye. They called it the tyranny of the external, the dangerous habit of outsourcing your sense of well-being to things you cannot ultimately control, and they recognized it as the single fastest route to a life of quiet desperation and chronic anxiety. When you scroll through Instagram and see your friend's beach vacation, or your colleague's promotion, or that influencer's six-pack abs, or that couple's seemingly perfect relationship, and you feel that familiar pang of inadequacy, what is actually happening inside your brain is a catastrophic misalignment between your internal measure of self-worth and your external measure of social comparison. You are holding up your messy, complicated, behind-the-scenes reality against someone else's polished, filtered, carefully edited highlight reel, and then you are concluding, entirely illogically, that there is something fundamentally wrong with you. But here is the Stoic truth that changes everything. You are comparing apples to a carefully constructed painting of an apple, and then wondering why the real apple doesn't look as good as the painting. You are measuring your entire life against a carefully curated fragment of someone else's life, and you are losing that comparison every single time because the comparison itself is structurally rigged against you from the very start. No one posts their arguments, their anxieties, their therapy sessions, their sleepless nights, their imposter syndrome, their student debt, their family drama, their health scares, or their existential dread. They post the sunset, the promotion, the engagement ring, the gym selfie, the perfectly plated meal, the laughably idealized version of existence that bears almost no resemblance to the actual texture of their daily life. And yet, knowing this intellectually, you still fall for it, because your brain is not wired to process intellectual knowledge in the face of emotional triggers. Your brain is wired to react, to compare, to feel threatened, and to seek safety in the approval of the tribe. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who was born into slavery and knew more about suffering and limitation than most of us will ever experience, taught a simple but devastatingly powerful principle that I want you to tattoo onto your frontal lobe. Some things are within your control, and some things are not. And your entire emotional life hinges on your ability to distinguish between the two with razor-sharp clarity. What is within your control when you open social media? Your intention, your attention, your interpretation, your reaction, your scroll time, your follow list, your mute button, your block button, your decision to engage or disengage, your choice to internalize or to dismiss, your willingness to question your own emotional responses, your discipline to put the phone down when you feel the familiar spiral beginning. What is not within your control? What other people post, how many likes they get, how many followers they have, what they think of you, what they think of your life, what they think of your face, what they think of your job, what they think of anything at all, whether they even notice you, whether they care about you, whether they will still be there tomorrow when the likes stop coming. And yet, most of us spend the vast majority of our emotional energy obsessing over the second category, the category we cannot touch, cannot change, cannot influence, cannot control, while neglecting the first category entirely, neglecting the only domain where we actually have any real power, any real agency, and any real freedom. The Stoics called this the internal citadel, the fortress of the mind that no external force can breach unless you lower the drawbridge yourself. And social media is essentially a never-ending siege engine designed to convince you to lower that drawbridge voluntarily, eagerly, repeatedly, until you have handed over the keys to your own happiness to complete strangers who do not know you, do not love you, and frankly do not care about you beyond the momentary entertainment you provide them. When you post a photo and then anxiously refresh to watch the likes accumulate, you are performing a ritual of self-abandonment. You are saying to the universe, "My worth will be determined by the number of double taps I receive from people I haven't spoken to in years." And that is a recipe for perpetual disappointment because the numbers will never be high enough, the validation will never be sufficient, the applause will never be loud enough to fill the void that only you can fill by looking inward and making peace with who you actually are when no one is watching. Seneca, another giant of Stoic thought, warned us that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And nowhere is that more evident than in the way we torture ourselves with imaginary comparisons to imaginary versions of other people's imaginary lives. We build elaborate fantasies about how happy they must be, how successful they must be, how fulfilled they must be, and then we feel inadequate in comparison to a fantasy that we ourselves have constructed, a fantasy that almost certainly bears little to no resemblance to their actual lived experience, which is just as messy and complicated and uncertain and difficult as yours. The truth that social media will never tell you, because it has no economic incentive to tell you, is that everyone is struggling, everyone is faking it to some degree, everyone is posting their best angles and hiding their worst days, everyone is curating a version of themselves that is designed to project confidence and happiness and success, precisely because they do not feel confident or happy or successful enough on the inside. It is a massive global collective performance of adequacy, and the tragedy is that we are all performing for an audience that is also performing for us, so no one is actually watching, and no one is actually being seen, and no one is actually connecting in any meaningful way. And yet we are all exhausting ourselves trying to win a competition that has no winner, no prize, and no endpoint. So what does the Stoic solution actually look like in practice, not just in abstract philosophy, but in the gritty, messy reality of your thumb hovering over the Instagram icon at 10 p.m. on a Thursday night when you are tired and lonely and vulnerable and looking for a hit of dopamine to numb the quiet ache of existence? It looks like a deliberate, disciplined, intentional shift in how you measure your self-worth. And that shift begins with a single question that I want you to ask yourself every single time you feel that familiar pang of inadequacy. Am I feeling bad because I genuinely want what they have, or am I feeling bad because I want their approval? And the answer, 9 times out of 10, will be the second one. You don't actually want to be an influencer traveling to Bali every other week. You want people to think you are impressive enough to be that person. You don't actually want your colleague's corner office. You want people to think you are successful enough to have earned that office. You don't actually want your friend's relationship. You want people to think you are desirable enough to be in that relationship. It is almost never about the thing itself, and almost always about the validation that you imagine the thing would bring you. And that is the crucial realization, because if you can recognize that your envy is really just a longing for external approval, you can then recognize that external approval is a drug that requires an ever-increasing dose to achieve the same fleeting high, and that you have been addicted to that drug for so long that you have forgotten what sobriety even feels like. The Stoic remedy is to switch your scorecard, to move from an external scorecard measured by likes and followers and retweets and comments, to an internal scorecard measured by your own core values and character and integrity and virtue. On your internal scorecard, the only metrics that matter are questions like, did I act with kindness today? Did I tell the truth when it was easier to lie? Did I resist the temptation to gossip? Did I show up for someone who needed me? Did I waste my time on things that don't matter? Or did I invest my attention in things that do? Did I complain about circumstances I can't change, or did I accept them and focus on what I can do? Did I compare myself to others, or did I compare myself to who I was yesterday and strive to be a little better today? Did I practice patience when I was provoked? Did I extend grace to someone who didn't deserve it? Did I keep a promise even when it was inconvenient? Did I use my privilege to help someone with less? Did I choose courage over comfort? Did I choose honesty over popularity? These are the questions that actually measure the quality of a human life, not the number of pixels that light up under your photograph. And when you anchor your self-esteem to these questions, the opinions of the crowd become laughably irrelevant, because the crowd does not know you. The crowd does not love you. The crowd does not understand your struggles or your sacrifices or your unique path through this world. And the crowd is, frankly, a fickle, inconsistent, easily manipulated collection of strangers who will applaud you one day and cancel you the next and forget you existed the day after that. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Read that sentence again and let it land. You love yourself. You have to, on some fundamental survival level. But you care more about what strangers think of you than what you think of yourself. And that is the source of almost all of your anxiety, almost all of your inadequacy, almost all of your restless discontent. The solution is not to delete the apps and become a digital hermit, because the problem is not the apps, the problem is your relationship to them. The problem is your dependency on them for emotional regulation. The problem is your habit of handing over the keys to your self-worth every time you open them. And if you delete them without addressing that internal habit, you will simply find something else to attach your anxiety to. You will compare your car to your neighbors, your salary to your siblings, your body to the person standing next to you in the gym mirror, your parenting to the mom at the school drop-off, your cooking to the influencer on TikTok, your travels to the couple on your feed, your career trajectory to the former classmate who seems to have skyrocketed past you. The external world will always provide you with someone to compare yourself to, someone who seems to have more, someone who seems to be ahead, someone who seems to have figured it all out. And if you try to escape that by escaping the external world, you will fail, because the external world is everywhere and inescapable. The only real escape is internal. It is the escape of changing your mind, of recalibrating your internal compass, of deciding that your worth is not negotiable, that your worth is not up for a vote, that your worth is not determined by how many people click a heart-shaped button under your latest selfie. That is the radical freedom that Stoicism offers you. The freedom to be indifferent to the opinions of others while remaining deeply committed to your own moral improvement. The freedom to scroll without envy. The freedom to engage without anxiety. The freedom to post without desperation. The freedom to witness the curated lives of others without feeling diminished by them. You can use social media as a tool for connection, for learning, for entertainment, for inspiration, for community, for humor, for staying in touch with loved ones who live far away, without letting it become a measuring stick for your own existence. You can admire someone else's vacation without concluding that your own life is inadequate. You can celebrate someone else's success without feeling threatened by it. You can appreciate someone else's beauty without feeling ugly by comparison. You can respect someone else's achievement without feeling like a failure because you haven't achieved the same thing on the same timeline. That is not naivety. That is maturity. That is discipline. That is the hard-won wisdom of someone who has decided to stop outsourcing their happiness to the applause of strangers and start finding it in the quiet satisfaction of living a life that aligns with their own values. And the practical, actionable way to build that muscle is simple, but not easy. It requires daily practice, daily repetition, daily reminding yourself of the distinction between what is yours and what is theirs, between what matters and what merely seems to matter, between the substance of a life and the performance of a life. I want to give you 3 concrete exercises to start implementing today, starting right now, the moment this video ends. The first exercise is what I call the morning preview. Before you open any social media app in the morning, before you check your notifications, before you scroll through your feed, before you expose yourself to the carefully curated accomplishments of thousands of strangers, take 2 minutes to write down one single thing you want to accomplish today that aligns with your core values. One thing that would make you proud of yourself at the end of the day regardless of what anyone else does or says or posts. It could be something small, like calling a family member you haven't spoken to in a while, or finishing a work task you've been procrastinating, or going for a walk without your phone, or reading 10 pages of a book, or practicing patience with a difficult person in your life, or cooking a meal from scratch, or writing a thank you note to someone who helped you, or simply being fully present with your children for 30 minutes without checking your notifications. By doing this, you anchor your sense of self-worth to your own intentions and actions before you ever expose yourself to the external noise of other people's accomplishments, so that when you do open Instagram and see someone else's highlight reel, you already have a grounded sense of your own direction and purpose, and their journey becomes simply their journey, not a referendum on yours. The second exercise is the why filter. Every time you feel a spike of envy or inadequacy while scrolling, stop and ask yourself that question we talked about earlier. Do I actually want what they have, or do I just want their approval? And then ask yourself a follow-up question. If no one ever knew that I achieved this thing, if I could never post about it or tell anyone about it, if I had to keep it completely secret for the rest of my life, would I still want it? If the answer is no, if you would not want it in total anonymity, then what you are craving is not the thing but the validation, and you can release that craving by recognizing it for what it is, a hollow hunger that can never truly be satisfied. A phantom need that will always leave you wanting more, a treadmill that you can run on forever without ever getting anywhere. If the answer is yes, if you would still want it, even if no one ever applauded you for it, then channel that desire into constructive action rather than resentful comparison, and use their success not as a weapon against yourself, but as evidence that the thing you want is possible, as inspiration that can fuel your own efforts rather than an indictment of your own inadequacy. The third exercise is the internal scorecard review. At the end of each day, before you go to sleep, before you scroll one last time to see what you might have missed, before you chase that final hit of dopamine before bed, spend 3 minutes reviewing your day through the lens of your own core values, not through the lens of social comparison, not through the lens of how many likes your post got, not through the lens of whether that person replied to your story, but through the lens of who you actually are and who you are becoming. Ask yourself, did I act with integrity today? Was I kind? Was I honest? Was I disciplined? Did I use my time well? Did I treat people with dignity? Did I resist the urge to compare? Did I catch myself seeking validation and redirect myself toward virtue? Did I waste energy on things that don't matter, or did I invest it in things that do? Did I add value to someone's life today, or did I just consume? Did I grow even a little bit, or did I stay exactly where I was? Write down your answers in a journal or even just in the Notes app on your phone, and over time, as you accumulate this daily record of your own character, you will build a sense of self-worth that is unshakable, because it is based on actual evidence of your own moral effort, not on the fleeting and unreliable opinions of the digital crowd. You will have a document of your own growth, your own struggles, your own small victories, your own incremental progress, and that document will become an anchor that holds you steady when the waves of comparison threaten to pull you under. That is the Stoic path, and it is a path that leads not to arrogance or smugness or indifference to the suffering of others, but to a quiet, grounded, resilient sense of peace that no algorithmic feed can disturb and no absence of likes can diminish. You are so much more than your online presence. You are so much more than your follower count. You are so much more than the carefully curated version of yourself that you present to the world. You are a complex, flawed, beautiful, struggling, striving, evolving human being with a unique journey and a unique purpose. And the only person who can truly measure the quality of that journey is you. By the standards that you choose, by the values that you hold, by the character that you build one day at a time. Do not delete Instagram if you don't want to. Do not flee from the digital world if it brings you value. Do not let anyone shame you for being online or enjoying the connectivity that these platforms can provide when used intentionally and mindfully. But absolutely, unequivocally, decisively change your mind about what matters. Change your mind about where your worth comes from. Change your mind about who gets to define your value, and reclaim the sovereignty of your own consciousness from the noise of the crowd. That is the wisdom of the Stoics, and that wisdom is as relevant today, in the age of infinite scrolling and constant comparison, as it was in the age of Roman emperors and Greek philosophers, because human nature has not changed. Our hunger for approval has not changed. Our tendency to measure ourselves against others has not changed, and the solution has not changed either. The solution is to turn inward, to know yourself, to trust yourself, to be yourself, and to let the crowd do whatever it does while you do what only you can do. Live a life of integrity, a life of virtue, a life that is genuinely your own, a life that you can look back on without regret, a life that reflects your deepest values rather than the shallow preferences of strangers who will forget you the moment they scroll past your photo. You can change your mind, and when you change your mind, you change everything, because the world that wounds you is not the world outside your head, but the world inside it. And that world is yours to redesign, yours to rebuild, yours to free from the tyranny of external validation, yours to fill with meaning that you have chosen rather than meaning that has been imposed upon you by algorithms and influencers and advertising agencies and all the other forces that profit from your insecurity. If this video helped you feel even a little bit lighter, even a little bit more empowered, even a little bit less alone in your struggle, don't hit subscribe because I asked you to. Hit subscribe because you value your own peace of mind more than a notification badge, because you are choosing to invest in content that elevates you rather than drains you, because you are committing to the long and difficult but infinitely rewarding work of changing your mind, because you understand that the battle for your attention is also the battle for your soul, and because you are ready to stop being a passive consumer of other people's curated lives and start being the active author of your own. I'll see you in the next one, and until then, remember, the only approval you truly need is your own. The only applause that ultimately satisfies comes from your own conscience, and the only life worth comparing yourself to is the life you could be living if you stopped worrying about what everyone else thinks and started focusing on what you actually value. You are enough, not because anyone says you are, but because you are. Flawed and incomplete and still showing up every day, still trying, still growing, still becoming. And that is more than enough.